Hi everyone, I'm UKGE and you're watching The Broken Meeple, a show where I review and rant about board games, usually more the latter. This is a special one that I'm also going to do in audio form for podcast viewers for this Sunday, which is essentially my wrap-up of the Games Expo. So the UK Games Expo, our biggest convention that we have in this country, it's been getting bigger and bigger every year, which has its good and bad points. We'll get on to that. But essentially, I went again this year for 2024. I have not got like a massive, huge hall of games picture or anything like that, you know, like some people do, because some people go there and literally buy their entire collections worth. But for me, I just acquire a couple of games that I was interested in, a couple of review copies here and there. Most of the stuff tends to get delivered after the fact. I'll go into details on a few of those. But for the most part, I go to the UK Games Expo just to socialise. Really, it's to see everybody, to see content creators and publishers and fans of the show alike. And thanks to everybody who did come up and say hi to me or have a chat with me about games or what I do on the show or even just, you know, personal stuff, whatever. It was great to speak to you, great to see you, and obviously if you see me again at other conventions, then by all means just say hi. I love it when people do.
Pleasure to be meeting you, quite a pleasure.
So yeah, what to talk about first? Well, the Expo itself, was it any good? Yeah, generally pretty good, but not without its flaws. Certainly, it was noticeable that there was a lot more people there. They definitely upped the numbers from last year. I don't know the official numbers for this year yet, but there was definitely more. But it didn't seem like there was any extra footprint. We still had the same two halls as before, the same other hall for ticketing and events and open gaming. And so you're trying to squeeze in more people into this space, and whether it was because they didn't utilize the space efficiently or just the fact that there was just too many people, it definitely felt a lot busier, particularly on Friday and Saturday. Sunday is still relatively good. It's still relatively easy to get around. You know, you can kind of chillax a bit, but you know, Friday felt like the Saturdays of old, and Saturday felt like, wow, Saturday times two. It really was packed in there. And if you've got people with giant bags or, you know, other things that they're pulling along or trolleys, you know, for kids and that, it becomes pretty noticeable that it's hard to get around. And you know, case in point, I was using one of those big board game table backpacks on the Friday because I had to pick up stuff for review and stuff I was buying, but then I travelled light on Saturday and Sunday. So if I was one of the ones who knocked you with my bag as I was turning around on the Friday, then sorry about that. But I do try to travel light, but you can only do so much. The cost is also getting a little bit prohibitive, I must admit. I mean, I stayed somewhere which I think was the equivalent of the range of 35 to 50 a night, depending on the day. But that involved me having to travel 20 minutes out, you know, from the M6 to the NEC, you know, park in the car park and, you know, deal with that, all the logistics of that. And even then, it was a pretty, like, bare bones breakfast if that, and, you know, basic living conditions. And that was, like, on the pinnacle of how much I'm willing to spend on a hotel room. I hate spending loads on hotels. You know, no hotel room justifies more than about £50 a night, really. It doesn't. You just need a bed, just needs to be clean, a half-decent shower and a breakfast. That's all it needs. It doesn't need a million other facilities on board. And so whenever these places, like particularly around the Expo, are charging like £100 plus a night, it's just a rip-off. I can't justify any reason why you would pay that kind of money. And next year, it just looks like the prices are just going to be as high, if not higher again. So I think for next year onwards, I'm going to be definitely doing some volunteering with the publisher because I need to be able to subsidize some of the cost of living there in order to actually facilitate the need to go to the Games Expo every year. But, oh blimey, it was getting a bit on the pricey side, and that's before you get to the food. Wow. Yeah, the places inside the NEC Centre have certainly started upping their prices in terms of food. I mean, if you go to the Wetherspoons, this is probably the best deal you can get. Go to the Wetherspoons in there, I forget what they call it, or it's just called Spoons. Go in there and buy their refillable coffee. You can pay, I think, £3.40 for a decent-sized mug, and you go to their machine, it's got half-decent coffee in it, and you can have whatever, like cappuccino, decaf, and all that stuff, but you can refill it as many times as you like. Honestly, that's the most cost-efficient beverage you can have there. Refillable coffee. You have it from any of the other stands, and it will cost you a packet, or it will be worse coffee, frankly. But the meals in there were like £12 for a jack of potato. I met up with two of my friends, and they basically had like a burger and chips. You know, that was all they had, and it cost them like £15, £16. And I just looked at it thinking, this would make me sad. Like, this would absolutely make me sad if I spent that much money on a burger and chips. You know, I take snacks, I take trail mix, nuts, apples and all sorts of, crackers and rice crackers, rice crackers particularly are great, and take those in. And they feed me throughout the day, but I certainly was missing having a proper meal during that thing. But I mean, when the costs are so great in there, then, well, you gotta make do with other means. So, the Expo is still good fun, but they do need to work on utilizing the space and getting those costs down. And next year, it's going to be just as bad because we lose Hall 1 now. Hall 1's being let out on a long lease. So now they've got to put everything in Hall 2, 3, and 4 now. Now, 4 has less footprint, I think, than the other one, or at least they believe they'll have less footprint for the trade show. So they're going to have to get even more clever with the space. Does that mean we're going to lose publishers? Does that mean we're going to, have to really drop the numbers down on the tickets so we don't sell as many tickets? I personally think that would probably be the best idea, frankly. I think with the space you've got, you need to bring the numbers down because it is very hard for people to deal with the noise, demoers and attendees alike, and it's just too packed on certain days. So you've got to worry about banging into each other. Publishers have got to worry about theft of their products, because you can only have so much security in there. It does become a bit of an issue. So next year is going to be interesting, let's put it that way. But that's enough, bad stuff about the Expo itself being run. It's still a good fun time. There's still lots of indie publishers and accessories and all these different things to do. I mean, I don't go into any of the shows, I haven't got time for that sort of thing, but, just wandering around the trade hall, doing some open gaming, visiting people, that alone is enough for me to deal with the UK Games Expo. And, I've got a few games here, but these are, for the most part, review copies as opposed to stuff I played.
Get on with it.
What I'm going to do for the rest of this video is just basically tell you about games that I demoed and tell you my thoughts on them. I've played a single demo. There might have been quick demos, scripted demos, a full game, but I'm going to essentially just tell you about them and indicate which ones I think are fine, which ones I think are not great, and which ones I think are like the must-see by the end of the year. So just to go over a few of these like small ones here, most of these are either review copies or stuff that I've bought, as and when. So for example, Windmill Valley, this is one that I have demoed. I will talk about this a bit later, but I couldn't get a review copy of it, so I basically just bought it while I was on site. So I will do a full review of this one, but it's obviously going to need lots more plays. I've just basically unboxed it for now. Birdwood Games have very kindly given me a bunch of stuff to review. Not these, I'll get onto those in a minute, but basically yet to arrive in the post because they were selling out of their copies at the Expo, so no way would I want to take any of that potential revenue from them. But they've given me a copy of Dog Park along with the new Tricks expansion, which apparently is a way to add a little bit more gamer depth to the game, so that sounds pretty cool. As well as their new tile lane game, Forever Home, also themed around keeping dogs and stuff. So these two I'm looking forward to review, but I can't do anything about Dog Park New Tricks until I get the base game to review because I've still not actually played the base game. A friend of mine has it and has brought it to the club, but I've just never managed to get involved in it. And this one looks like a nice little cute game, so by all means, I'm definitely going to look forward to these. So thanks for the copies. I will get onto that. Well, I'll be able to get onto this a bit sooner, but Dog Park, we'll wait until we've got the base game. So that's cool on there. This one isn't so much a review copy. I just had a little bit of credit left over and on the site and just decided, you know what, let's just give it a shot. People have asked me to comment on Sand. It's not a game that I was desperate for, a pick up and deliver game, and Devier games tend to be a little bit on the hit and miss side with me lately, but for every White Castle there's a Free Ring Circus, for example. But I thought I'd give this a shot. My mate has tried a couple of rounds of it. He wants to try it a bit more, so this one will be one that I'll play with some of the more elite gamers in my group, and we'll see if it's any good. I mean, certainly I like the imagery with traveling across the desert on these little worms. I mean, this kind of feels a bit like Dune if it was a pick up and deliver game with a bit more comedy involved, but we'll see what that's like. And I forgot about these little things. I'm not reviewing these little packs. Basically, what I like to do with indie publishers is that if they give me stuff to review, I like to give them a little bit of money back because they've got to fight tooth and nail to stay afloat compared to some of the bigger names. So, in kindness for them giving me Dog Park and Forever Home and the expansion to review for free, I thought, I'll chip in a bit of money, and I bought these packs. So famous dogs, European dogs, and dogs of the world. I believe you just shuffle these into the base game and that's it, so it's just more variety, but hey, more variety is nice, but okay, I'll make a little comment about these when I do the actual expansion review. So why don't we start with the one that I had literally just a few moments ago when I was talking about stuff I grabbed, Windmill Valley. So this one is Board and Dice's new game, and it's probably the most colourful game Board and Dice have ever put out. Have you seen some of the stuff they've done? It's usually lots of beige, lots of drab greys and stuff. I mean, take a look at Terracotta Army and, you know, Tiletum and some of those other games that they've done. You know, they're pretty... You know, they may be decent games, but they're, well, I don't know. Terracotta Army, I think, was a bit of a dud. But, you know, whether you like the games or not, they're not lookers by any way, shape, or form. This one is a looker. You know, it's not the best looking game I've ever seen, but it is very pretty as it's all set in kind of like Dutch tulip land and everything. Now, it's a little bit messy because I've essentially like unboxed it and got everything assembled, but essentially what it revolves around with, and I'm going to show pictures for all of these so you'll be able to see them on there, but this one revolves around these two gears. So all your actions in this game as you're effectively just trying to get victory points by building windmills and, you know, planting tulips in particular patterns in your field and going to market and such. It all revolves around these two wheels. So what you do is that you have a floodgate setting, which basically dictates how many turns you've got to give this. So, you know, for every one that is, you turn the wheel, and the two actions that show at the top in this wheel and this wheel are the two that you actually do. So the right hand is all the same, it just gets you a little bonus for lowering the floodgates, and the left hand one gives you all the main actions like getting windmills and planting and collecting upgrades and stuff. But the floodgate dictates how many turns you've got to do, so it might be 1, 2, or 3, and you can augment this with tools. But the idea is that as you go through the game and you're doing these actions, you'll be able to upgrade these two wheels. So you can get these little segments in here which basically give you more powerful actions, maybe replace them with others. You know, if I'm not going to the shipping track, I might just replace it with something that I am doing, like windmills. And the right-hand one, you can build up with all sorts of other effects. And so it's all about comboing and getting the most out of your actions with these two wheels. That's kind of like the crux of the game. So far, I've enjoyed it, but I've only played a couple of rounds of it. So we played a semi-scripted round and then like a full round. And I do mean semi-scripted. We were kind of left to our own devices because there's not a huge amount of rules in this game. And the rules are fairly easy to comprehend. They're not too fiddly. That didn't feel like, you know, some of their older stuff where it's like a half a dozen rules or steps to do this one thing. This one feels like one of the smoothest titles I've seen from Board and Dice in recent years. 45 to 90 minutes also seems relatively accurate. I mean, we played through what was effectively half a game in a relatively short space of time, and I do not doubt that you would be able to make this a 90-minute game if you did it with 4 players who knew what they were doing. First game, I'd probably see this more going down to the 2-hour mark, but in no way, shape or form should it go any longer than 2 hours. I think that would literally have to be some chronic AP. And there's even a solo mode for me to try, which I have not looked into yet, but you know, Danny Garcia's solo modes tend to be reasonable. Nothing stands out as far as I'm aware as like a belter of a solo mode, but they tend to be pretty good and playable. So I think I might be getting this played on Friday with the Elite group. Failing that, I've got an all-day event on Saturday coming up, which I'm going to test out for a new games club, and I'll be taking Windmill Valley and some of these other games there, and we'll be able to play these multiple times. So, you know, I'm looking forward to giving this one more play. So far, I think it's good. I think it's nice and smooth. It's not lightweight. It's probably midweight, but on the lower end of that. You know, there's not a huge amount of different things you're doing in it, and not a ton of complexity, but certainly enough depth in there to keep gamers interested. So, you know, we'll see how good this is a little further down the line.
I think she's pretty.
Quiet, bud.
So next up, let's talk about Alley Cat Games. This one is Ada's Dream. It was a demo. I think it's coming to Kickstarter later this year. And this one is in their heavier range, so along the sort of regions of Autobahn and Arborea. And I forget the setting. It's you know, this Ada character. I think it was something like the initial ideas for the first computer or the first like computing system. I'm not sure. I might be wrong. I'll put the exact page and details on the thing for you in case I've got that wrong, but that's kind of near to here or there. It's in the game and you do these things with the mechanics, but for the most part it's a relatively dry game. But it's the mechanics that actually made me enjoy this one a bit. It gave me kind of a kind of Newton feel, if you know that one from Cranio Creations, where you've got like a few different subsections of Euro mechanics, almost like a few mini games, and each one interlinks with the other in some way, but they do function differently. So in Newton, you've got the map, you've got the bookcases, you've got the the action tiles, you've got the student tracks. Well, this one's kind of similar. You've got a map of England that you can go around and visit the universities. You've got these this kind of reception hall where you can meet all these different other sort of professors and inventors, and you've got Ada's workshop and like these other like places you can give talks to. So there's 4 different clear sections of the board, but the mechanics of this were quite interesting. You basically have 2 things that you can do. You can either take a die from the central kind of spinning cog section, or you can use one of the dice that you've stored previously in one of those 4 other sections of the board, depending on what color it is. And grabbing a die is quite cool in itself. What you do is that you basically take a die off one spot on this rondelle wheel, you move it to the next one along, kick something of lower value, you get a bonus for doing it, and then the die you retain on your storage board. But then the color of that die dictates what actions you can do with it. So if it's green, I go give a talk and do research. If if it's a blue, I go navigate around the map of England. And so on top of that, you're also trying to build this grid in the middle of your board where you total up your victory points based on putting these cogs in. And so you have something like, this row is 2 plus 6 minus 1. So that would make 7 points. And, other little multipliers can be put around the board. And so as well as getting points by other means, you're trying to build this grid of yours in such a way as to be efficient while getting yourself bonuses. On top of that, you got some interesting card play where when you take certain dice of certain values, typically the low ones, which tend to not be great ones from the middle of your board, you can play these really good cards from your hand that let you do other cool bonuses. And I always like that. I like the idea that when I'm doing other stuff, I can also go, ooh, I can also play this, I can also do this. And it definitely is one of those ones about creating combo turns and getting the most out of your actions. The game itself I found quite entertaining, actually. I mean, this is definitely one that I'm going to be playing more as a dry Euro, but mechanics-wise, I enjoyed it. The manipulation of the dice felt fulfilling. The card play allows you to create some cool combo turns. You've got 4 very distinct sections of the board in which to get various bonuses and resources that you can use elsewhere. So you can kind of diversify a little or focus really hard on one aspect. So as I say, it does carry a bit of the feel that Newton had. Now, it also looks pretty good. I forget who the artist for this one is. I can't remember if it was Vincent Dutrait or someone else, but this one is, a looker as well, so it's got the looks on the table, and it felt smoother. The rules didn't seem as complex and fiddly as some of the other ones, like say, well, funny enough, Autobahn and Arborea. Those ones have got more fiddly rules as part of their games. This one I thought felt a little bit smoother in that regard. Apart from maybe 1 or 2 actions in there, they felt a little bit like sort of multi-step, I think, particularly with the green section on the board where you're giving talks and you've got the, right, well, if you've got so much innovation, you can go up this high, and then when you trigger this, there was a couple of little weird fiddly bits there, but this is a game that hasn't even gone to Kickstarter yet, and it already looks pretty solid. So this one's one to give a look out if you want a kind of mid-weight dry Euro from Alicat Games. I'm definitely going to be hoping to give this one a look when it gets a full release.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
Funny enough, we mentioned Vincent Dutrait. Why don't we go with one of his other illustrated games from Paverson Games, who did Distilled before. Now, Distilled is a game that I kind of have a hit and miss relationship with. Some of it I like, but I don't like that luck mechanic where you sort of top and tail the deck of cards that you've got, which could screw over your entire turn. And I also didn't like the graphic design in Distilled. I thought it was way too small and impossible to read anything from a distance. But this is their new one. I believe it's called Luthier. God knows how it's exactly pronounced, but essentially it's set in the sort of time period where you control a family that's responsible for like making instruments. You design and make instruments, you make high quality stuff, and those instruments will get used in performances by patrons who are like the famous ones like Mozart and Tchaikovsky. So it's about making a name for yourself in that world. This game is coming to Kickstarter, I believe, later this year, so it probably won't get until a 25 release. And we had a scripted demo. This was fully scripted. So the entire first round was entirely based on what they call the first rehearsal, which they did something similar in Distilled. I can't remember what it was, the first brew or something. And it basically walks you through the entire first round, gives you tips for the second round, and then you just get on with it. I actually think this is a fantastic way to teach games. You don't have to use it. You can have it as an option in a game, but I think it works really well to have a first round script that everybody follows, particularly if you yourself have only just read the rules and don't feel comfortable teaching the game. But by the time we were done with the first scripted round, which did take a while, I mean, give credit to the guy teaching us, he did a pretty good job overall, but it was a little bit on the slow side. We should have got into the second round a bit quicker, and we could have sped things up, particularly with, some people taking quite a while to do their turns when the turns are literally spelled out for you on these reference cards. So it's like, what exactly did you need to clarify? But, that aside, it was still a decent demo, and it gave me a feel for the game. What you're essentially doing is you are repairing instruments, you're building them, you're getting them performed at various venues, and you're hiring patrons who will, support, that you'll make the instruments for and showcase what you can do. But the idea is that you play slightly asymmetric families, so each of you has got a slightly different setup and a different, a few tweaks here and there. But the crux of the game revolves around your workers, which are numbered, and it's hidden placement. Not bidding, but the idea is that you've got these action spots that you go to, and you've got different numbers on these things. And so what you do is that you put one face down in turn order on the various spots, and then when it's your turn, you choose one of the spaces to take the entire stack and resolve in initiative order, i.e., going from the highest value and down. And so the idea is that the initiative value becomes important, because if you really want to get something before someone else does, you need to make sure that your value is high enough. And there are certain bonuses that you only get if your value is high enough. But of course, you do have some low ones that you've got to put somewhere, so where do you put them? Where do you decide to go? There's an element of trying to think, what's the opponent likely to do? Are you likely to go there and nick that flute that I want to create? Or are you there after the drum kit? Maybe I can go there with a low value, but I don't know. And then you look over at the patron section, you realise 2 people have already gone there. And it's like, well, okay, did one of them go there with a high value number? Can I afford just to put any old one down there? And even if you don't get what you want, you can still use your move to get some resources. And sometimes you might go to a spot purely with the intention of getting resources. Like, I don't intend to get a patron, but if I go there, I get some brass. I could do with some of that. I was going to go repair something, but, if it's not there, what the hell? I can get some wood, and I do need some wood. So it never totally feels like you get screwed entirely. There's always something that you can get that is useful. But the turns are fairly smooth. The only slight downside I can think of, though, is that if you've got people who AP a little bit with this game, you might have situations where, 2 people go before you and they resolve stacks of multiple turns where you're not involved because you went elsewhere. So you may have very fluctuating periods of when you're doing lots of actions in a row, like I certainly was in my scripted area, and ones where you might be waiting ages before you get a turn to do something. But it swings and roundabouts. It will come back your way eventually, but it's certainly not going to be a linear progression of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's definitely going to, be a little bit more wild. Not as bad as something like Grand Austria Hotel, though, where you've got that stupid snake draft thing, where you might go first in one round, and then you might go last in the next round. So you go first, and then you got to wait for second, third, fourth, and then another first, second, third before you get another turn again. That I can't stand in games, but this one doesn't have that.
I hate waiting.
Okay, now we move on to Czech game editions, and this is SETI, spelled S-E-T-I. It's an acronym. I forget the definition, but this one is, I'm just going to straight out say it, this was the best game I played at the whole convention. This was the first one I played at the whole convention. I literally went to the press event, and this is what the press event's good for, because as you remember from my preview episode, it's very difficult to get a lot of decent details on games coming out of the Expo from the website, because the website sucks, and Board Game Geek doesn't seem to have a lot of decent reference guides as to what is there, and I need to see the stuff in front of me and have the publisher tell me about it, not just some blurb on a screen. So when I go to the press event, it tends to reveal the games where I'm like, okay, I'm not as keen on those anymore, but there's some hidden gems potentially, or I should gun for these ones first. Well, when I went to the Czech Game Editions bit of the press event last, it was the last one I had to go to, right? And I looked at the game, got explained it, and I immediately decided it was the first one I was going to gun for on the Friday. Like literally, as soon as I get through those doors, I'm going to the SETI demo. We had a first round scripted session, along with a second and thirdish round, left to our own devices, but with certain hints to go through the different mechanics. I believe the guy was Alex, I forget his name, it was a ginger guy, and kudos to him actually, I mean credit where it's due. I've done demoing before and it's not easy, okay? You've got all the noise, you've got everything talking around, you've got your throat to worry about, it's not easy, and remembering a script isn't easy either. But even though he had to refer to his phone every now and again to get to the scripts, I think he did a fantastic job given it was his first demo. He cracked jokes, he was like very sort of like laid back, he was very friendly with everyone, he did a fantastic job. So I hope I got your name right, but kudos where kudos is deserved. When demoers get it wrong, it's annoying because it messes up the demo, and it's wasting your time, your precious time there. But when demoers get it right, I do like to call them out and say, well done, because I think they deserve it. But this game is easily the best one I played. Like, this is one that when it gets released later in the year at Essen, I believe, that's what they're aiming for, an Essen release date. Oh man, do I want this game fast. This is kind of on the levels of something like Lost Ruins of Arnak for me, okay? Like a really great Euro game that I want. Now, it's a little heavier than Lost Ruins of Arnak, but not loads. I mean, I wouldn't even call this really a heavy game per se, but it's definitely on the upper end of medium. Definitely more than I'd say Lost Ruins of Arnak. But this one is kind of like from the demo I was playing, bear in mind we didn't finish a full game, but this has a lot of mechanics I like, okay? It's got the revolving board, which is kind of like almost like a little map to say where you can send your probes to. It's got multi-use cards. I love multi-use cards. Multi-use cards that are all unique with different effects. I absolutely love that in games. So it's already singing to me on that. But what Czech Game Editions do pretty well, I find, at least they have with recent games, is that when they focus on really interesting settings, and depending on the designer, they do a good job of representing that theme. It's set in a time period when humans were basically beaming out messages to outer space in the hope of discovering more aliens. They were sending probes into outer space further than they could before to all the distant planets to try and get data from it. Now, I'm sure some of this is fictionalized to some extent in order to make a full game, but I don't know how we were easily getting probes all the way to Neptune back then. I have no idea, but I'm not an expert on this field. But it's a real world setting that makes sense. And so as players, you're essentially trying to do the best in this front, but you've got all sorts of different things that you can do though. You can send out probes to particular planets and land on their planets or land on their moons or stay in orbit. You've got publicity where you do some of these things, you get the interest of the public, and this allows you to gain cool upgrades for your board. You've got the ability to sort of listen out for different messages that you might be hearing or like signals that you're getting in the different sectors, and this allows you to use those to power up your little like supercomputer. I like to call it Skynet effectively, which allows you to do more cool stuff. But then you've also got the ability to find new alien races. So there's 2 set up on the board and there's 5 potential in the box, and each one has its own flip side where it's got different action spaces you can go to with probes and your signals and your data. There's the stuff you get during the game, but each one is unique and it comes with its own little sub deck of cards on top of all the other unique cards that you've got. And this is an example of where the theme is done so well, because the theme is already represented well in the stuff you're doing. But these alien cards, because you're beaming off to the far distances of like deep space, it takes a while for messages to get there and back. So what happens is that you play the card, but the effect doesn't trigger off until 15 victory points ahead of the time frame that you're on. So if I'm on 26 points, it will then go to the 41 point mark, and it won't trigger until I get myself to 41 points. That is an example of not only interesting mechanics, because it forces me to try and get 15 points as quick as I can in order to get this really cool effect, but it's another example of theme being done justice. This doesn't feel like a dry game, even though I'm sure there are more thematically rich, immersive games, but it's a Euro game where the theme works. It's, you would struggle to paste something else on top of this without making it fantastical or sci-fi fiction, that kind of thing. But This one you can tell is like a passion project for the designer. You know he took the theme and the setting seriously. It looks gorgeous. I absolutely love the cover of this game with the blue skies and the radar dishes and the orange kind of the light reflection of the sand to create that orange glow. Oh man, I would love this picture on a canvas print on my wall, seriously. Wink wink, check game edition. Nah, I'm not asking for freebies like that, but seriously, I would put the cover of this game on a canvas print and shove it on my wall. It is really gorgeous. But everything about this game just sung to me. And maybe there's a slight bias because I think the demo was done really well. Maybe. It certainly does help. But I just think that mechanically this game has got what I want in a fairly mid to heavy-ish Euro. You know, a good combination of theme versus mechanics, interesting stuff to do, lots of options, lots of different strategies to form, little opportunities that you can grab. Like, I focused entirely on getting lots of data or signals and trying to build up my supercomputer while making use of really cool cards. I didn't really do a lot of probes on planets, but there were occasions where I had a card that said, if I can probe Mars today, I can get more victory points. Well, the map is spun around a little bit. I know Mars is not that far away. I could possibly do that. You know, maybe that would make a good action, a use of my energy, and you know, there's resource management and other bits. But you know, games like that really do work for me, and I had a blast. I cannot wait for this game. I think that if you get a chance to try it close to the Essen, you really, really must do. And I mean, I have to admit, I have to think about who I'm going to support on volunteer for the Essen. If Czech Game Editions want a spare volunteer and they want somebody to help teach this game, I'd be down for that, frankly. So, you know, I don't know, we'll cross that bridge at another time. But seriously, really enjoyed this one. This is definitely my #1 pick for games that I played at the Expo, and one that you should definitely keep a lookout for.
Shut up and take my money!
Okay, let's go back to, let's see, looking at my list, let's go back to Alley Cat Games briefly, because this one won't take me long. It was the other game that they brought out that was new there for, I think it was on retail release, I'm not sure, or maybe it's getting released later, and it's called Happy Home. Happy Home is a very simple polyomino game, which I know we've seen done to death, and certainly that does hurt this game in a little while because it has to stand out from the crowd. You're interior decorating a home, so you've got the bedroom and the living room, and you've got different furniture tiles that go in there, and they're set groupings, like you need a cooker and a cooker and a table and something else for the kitchen, that kind of thing. But the way the selection of the tiles is done is not quite patchwork. It's kind of a cross between patchwork and some of the other market ratchet mechanics that you've seen in other games, where basically you move your character around this trail of tiles, and you can go as far as you like, but then everybody before you gets a turn before you get to act again. So we've seen it in Search on Planet X, we've seen it in kind of patchwork, because the turn sequence in patchwork works on a similar basis, but you know, Takedo uses it. You know, a lot of games are using it. But it means that you might want that tile that's really good for you, but then you know that other players are going to get lots more tiles. And because there's decor as well that can get you points, you might think, well, maybe I should pick up one of those, but then somebody else might go ahead and get the one I want. And so we've seen this mechanic done, but it works here. And there's really not a lot of rules in this game. I mean, you've got an objective that can score you points at the end. You get points for having the right stuff in each room. You get, you have potential negative points if you don't cover these scratch marks. The objective can dictate, you know, whether you need to cover lots of spaces or leave big open spaces. You know, placement is key. You don't cover every single space in your room like with other games where you're trying to fit everything so tight and neat onto your board. It's more that you're trying to make efficient use of the spaces. Like, unless you have a particular objective, you don't get penalized for having empty spaces. So, you know, you don't have to fill up every space in the room. This is fine. I mean, it's nothing particularly like amazing. It will certainly appeal to anybody who's kind of into interior decorating or feng shui or doing up your new home, but it works. It's not enough to make it like, oh, this is like the best example of a polyomino game out there, but it takes two mechanics that works, it puts it together, it works with its theme, and it is very quick. I mean, you will teach the rules in barely 5 to 10 minutes, if that. You know, probably like 5 minutes you'll get most of these rules down, and the game itself doesn't take more than about 30 minutes. I think we played it with 3 of us, and we literally got a very fast hand teach of the rules, and I think within 30 minutes we were done. It's not a long game, so it's not anything to shout from the mountaintops about, but it is definitely a nice, simple polyomino game with a little bit of a difference from others that haven't necessarily combined it with the whole, you know, whoever's at the back goes last mechanic. But I enjoyed my time. It was a nice little pleasant game. You know, not much else to really say.
I admire its purity.
Ironwood. Ironwood. Oh man, yeah. If you've watched Mark Dainty, Snotboard Gaming, and a couple of other people as well, I think Ninja Geek Games, Mark Monk, I think also talked about this one a bit. Ironwood is the new 2-player skirmish game, I think being released soon from Mind Clash Games. So this is the publisher that does like really heavy stuff, like really complex stuff. Well, this one isn't actually that complex when you think about it. I mean, there is some complexity to it, but it's definitely on their lighter side of games. But this is a 2-player only skirmish game. So each of you controls a faction. It's completely pasted on this theme. It's just invent fantastical like setting here with effectively the tree-hugging hippies of the woodland world against the the ironclad metal monstrosities and drillers and stuff of the other faction. So yeah, you can definitely tell there's an environmental theme going on here. But the idea is that you have these cards, not all of which are unique, but you draw these cards and you play them for their effects, and you move these little guys around on a map, and each of you has a different objective. One of you is trying to search for these hidden totems in areas, and when they find them, they got to drag them out before they lose their power. The Ironclad, I think they're the Windwalkers they're called, or Wind something. But the Ironclad one, which was the faction I was playing, is one that is drilling for gems, and with these gems they can build these forges on the outskirts, and they're trying to build up 3 of those. I wasn't intending to demo this because honestly, I didn't really have that much interest in it. I mean, 2-player skirmish games are not something that I'm able to get to the table often. We have seen this genre done to absolute death, every which way but loose. Every time I go to any convention, I hear about somebody doing another 2-player game where 2 people go head to head for some reason. It's like, seen it, and the theme made no impact on me whatsoever. But in between one demo and another, I came across somebody who was literally just been explaining the rules by himself, and I thought, hey, if you want to play it, I'll jump in. And so I was able to squeeze this demo, a full game of it, in between what I was doing, which was pretty impressive on the Sunday. The game itself is fine. It's just nothing that really, really blew me away. The card play is fun, and the 2 factions do play reasonably differently, and there's definitely a little bit of tension with the combat because it's dual-use cards, and I hate the way they say multi-use cards when there's actually only 2 ways to use it. That technically is dual-use, but whatever. But the idea is that instead of playing the card for the effect, you can play it to get these like attack, defense, and presence stacks, which is essentially how you decide the winner of a battle, to add on for the fight on top of what units are there. And so there's that kind of Kemet style mechanic where you're thinking, well, he's fighting me and I outnumber him. Does that mean he's trying to kill a lot of my forces, or is he trying to win on presence? In which case, do I defend? Do I attack thinking that you're not going to have that much defense yourself? And it works really well in Kemet. It works really well here. The combat is probably the most fun part of the game. But what you're doing in order to win is fairly standard, not particularly exciting. It's just you do it with the cards. And the 2 factions do feel very different, although I thought the Ironclad felt like it would be an easier one to grok than the other one. The other one like don't get a lot of gems, and they have to do a kind of like hit and run approach, whereas Ironclad just basically has to be a solid iron wall basically to defend themselves while they're dealing with all the gems in the driller and stuff. I don't know, Ironclad just felt like it would be an easier faction to use. Bear in mind, I've not obviously tried the other faction. But, some people are claiming this to be like one of their best games of the year, or like an absolute powerhouse of a game. Honestly, I see this being played by a few people who are into 2-player skirmishy games, and that's about it. Maybe Mind Clash game fans as well. For me, this was one that I thought, I've played it, I liked it. If somebody wanted to play it, I would play it, but I would never seek it out, I mean, I played a full game of it. First impressions, in fact, can I rate any of these? What games have I played in full? I think this is one of the... Well, Happy Home I'd probably give a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. It's fine, above average or good. This one, probably a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 as well. I mean, it's above average, kind of good. I'd be hovering around that mark. But yeah, there's not much about this game that really stands out as like, this is truly unique in the genre. It just feels like another game in this genre with a theme that nobody cares about, with mechanics that we've seen before, even though some of the mechanics are good, don't get me wrong, but there's just not enough to get me excited for it again. That was the thing. So Ironwood is fine. I'm sure it's going to have its fans. I'm just not desperately one of them.